land nationalization, abolition of slavery, government price controls, state loans for farmers. If I told you these policies came from a Chinese emperor, which dynasty would you guess? Late Qing? The Republic? Neither. The year was 9 AD, 2,000 years ago. The man behind them was Wang Mang. Chinese internet users call him the time traveler. But the real question is not what he did. It is why a man born 2,000 years ago would think this way at all. Wang Mang was born into the most powerful consort clan of the Western Han dynasty. His aunt was the Empress Dowager. His uncles were all ennobled marquises, living in sprawling estates with armies of servants, but his branch of the family was the exception. His father died young before receiving any title. In a clan where power was distributed by blood, a dead father meant exile from the inner circle. He grew up on the margins of the family, living in a house far inferior to his cousins, wearing clothes barely above a servant's, watching every day as members of his own clan flaunted everything he would never have. He was not a poor man's child. He was the poor relative in a rich man's house, worse than true poverty, because every single day reminded him of what he lacked. But what he saw was not only his own deprivation, it was the rot of the entire clan. His uncles seized land, hoarded slaves, fought for power, and lived in extravagance. They were a mirror of the entire ruling class in the late Western Han. Land concentration had reached its extreme. Millions of farmers had lost their fields and fallen into vagrancy or slavery. The corruption a boy witnessed inside his family and the decay consuming the empire outside were the same disease. A person who grows up in that environment accumulates one thing above all: anger at injustice. But anger alone cannot become a system of thought. It needs a framework to contain it, something that says you are right and the world is wrong. The framework Wang Mang found was Confucian scholarship and, above all, the Rites of Zhou. This text described an idealized ancient society, land owned by the state and distributed equally through the well-field system, officials who were honest, commerce regulated by the government, the gap between rich and poor kept in check. For a boy who had never once seen fairness, the impact of this book was not, "I have learned a new theory." It was, "The world was not always like this. It was once better." Every darkness he had witnessed in his family had a luminous counterpart in this book. The Rites of Zhou did not teach him new ideas. It confirmed that the anger already inside him was righteous. But buried here was the greatest misjudgment of his life. Most scholars believe the ideal society described in the Rites of Zhou was not the real system of the Western Zhou dynasty, but a utopian model constructed by Confucian scholars during the Warring States and Qin Han periods. He was chasing a golden age that had never existed, and he believed in it absolutely. That belief reshaped everything he did. He served his widowed mother with legendary devotion, raised his dead brother's orphan children, gave away titles that should have been his, donated his family wealth to disaster relief. In a clan drowning in excess, he lived like an ascetic. But was this sincerity or strategy? Probably both. In a family where competition ran on connections and wealth, he had neither. The only resource that could set him apart from his cousins was moral reputation. They competed in spectacle. He competed in virtue. It was a brilliant survival strategy, but the path he chose happened to align perfectly with his inner fury. His disgust for the clan's corruption was real, and his use of morality to build standing was also real. When sincerity and strategy point in the same direction, a person can no longer tell whether he is performing or living. 30 years. From the age of 20 to 50. When a man spends 30 years proving the same thing to himself, it stops being a belief. It becomes who he is. So when he finally held supreme power, accepting abdication in 9 AD and founding his Jin dynasty, the first thing he did was not consolidate his rule. He opened the Rites of Zhou and began to build land nationalized, private sales forbidden, slavery abolished, prices controlled, state lending established, currency reformed. Every policy had a classical source. Everyone aimed at the same destination, the restoration of the age of sage kings. He was not a reformer ahead of his time. He was a restorationist looking backward. It just happened that the past he was trying to restore collided with policies that would not appear again for 2,000 years. But between the world in the book and the world beneath his feet lay a chasm he could not see. Nationalizing land required confiscating estates from powerful clans, but the local officials tasked with enforcement were themselves landowners. Currency was reformed 4 or 5 times in a few years, turning money in people's hands into worthless copper overnight, collapsing markets. A man fully convinced by his own moral narrative does not blame failure on the wrong direction. He blames it on insufficient effort. A man driven by ambition will compromise when he meets resistance because what he wants is power, and power can be traded. Wang Mang would not compromise because what he wanted was justice, and justice cannot be discounted. The more his policies failed, the harder he pushed. The harder he pushed, the worse things became, until the empire shattered. In 23 AD, rebel armies stormed the capital. Wang Mang was killed, his severed head was stored in the imperial treasury, and dynasty after dynasty kept it there for nearly 300 years. A boy raised on the margins of a great house, driven by anger into virtue, driven by virtue into power, who found a perfect world inside an ancient book, spent 30 years becoming its spokesman, and finally seized the ultimate authority to make it real, only to be smashed against the wall of reality. His tragedy was not that he was wrong, it was that he believed too deeply.